The Wilkes Booth thing. What is the theory behind that it could be a different body? What would the ramifications of that be?
Well, there's a guy named Finis L. Bates, who, by the way, is a direct ancestor of Kathy Bates, the actress.
Of
Finis L.
course.
Bates, yeah, he wrote a book that talked about the escape and death of John Wilkes Booth, and they even had a mummy that toured the country for a while that was, claimed it was a John Wilkes Booth mummy. But the idea was that he escaped, and they used a double. I think it was Captain William Boyd or something. He was the one that was shot in the barn. And for whatever reason, they let Booth escape, and then I don't really know why, but they his physician originally, when he went on and viewed the corpse on board the ship that he was on, said that that body bears no resemblance to John Wilkes Booth. And eventually he came around and said that it was him, but lots of doubt about it. And again, it's an easy way to solve it. Just exhume the body. You can do DNA now. But the fact they won't do it, what that doesn't that feed the conspiracy theories? I mean, what are you supposed to believe? Why won't you? I mean, if you want to shut these crazy conspiracy theorists up, just go ahead and exhume the body. But for whatever reason, they like to explain things, and that's why I like to use that word court historian, the term court historians, because it comes as a tip of the hat to Professor Harry Elmer Barnes, who was a great historian, and he was like a lot of these guys. He was a liberal in good standing in the 1920s. He wrote for the Nation, all the established, you know, periodicals of the day. But he made the mistake of analyzing World War One and saying, damn, I mean, all these millions of people died, and I can't figure out why. There's really like no reason at all for World War One. Why did these millions of people die? It was a senseless slaughter, and because of that, they drummed him out of the community. He was cancel culture, couldn't get a job anywhere else. And he ended up his days as a revision, speaking to a revisionist historical conferences because nobody else would talk to him. But so he's the one that invented the term court historian. So I always use it in honor of him because he was one of the many victims of that, where he just, later we saw somebody like John Toland, who won a Pulitzer Prize for his biography on Hitler. He was a court historian in good standing, but he made the mistake of writing Infamy in the early 1980s, which was the first book to show conclusively, meticulously researched, that FDR knew in advance about Pearl Harbor. So what happened? Drummed out of the community. Barbara Tuchman
Unbelievable, dude.
called him a Nazi, which makes no sense at all. He wasn't writing at all about Germany. He was saying FDR knew about Pearl Harbor, but they still called him a Nazi. And again, he wound up his days speaking to revisionist historical conferences because nobody else would talk to him. So that's what happens. Thank goodness now we have an alternative media. Those guys didn't have an alternative. Back then, Harry Elmer Barnes, they didn't have podcasts like yours. They could come on, or they would have been guests. But back then they just they don't have a job anymore. And you just we have to go talk to the Holocaust deniers. That's the only people that would talk to them, and it's very sad because it's I just laugh about it because tell me what my theory is. What's my anything in there that is it a theory that Muhammad Atta's passport floated down on top of obliterated metal and steel and 9/11? That's not a theory. They tell you that.
So
you explain it.
What was your theory on what was your theory, Don, on why World War One was started? What do you think the actual reason was?
Well, all I know is what they tell you. Archduke Ferdinand was assassinated, and somehow that precipitated a war where millions of people. And we had to get involved, and people like Eugene Debs, the great social people like that, protested, were thrown into jail, and as I said, the First Amendment became abridged because of that. They can't really give a reason. I mean, when push comes to shove, if you debate one of these guys with it, they pretty much acknowledge, well, they'll come up with some gobbledygook, but there was no reason at all. And World War One was so important and it was really the first globalist venture. So whatever globalists were back then, whatever you want to call the people that run things, they pushed this thing for a reason. And World War One ensured that there would be a World War Two because of the Treaty of Versailles. I explained how after the war, it really is the first time in history where the victors decided, hey, you know what, we're gonna find the losers. We're gonna
Yeah.
make you guys pay. So
Yeah.
most people don't realize that. Yeah, that after the war, they fined the hell out of Germany. Most Americans don't realize Germany did not stop paying reparations to the Allied nations for World War One until 2010. Now let that
But
sink in for a minute. They paid reparations from. Good.
No, I couldn't believe what you just said.
yeah, it's
Yeah, no,
great.
no,
And
it's
that's why I
amazing.
get into go on. Sorry, Don.
No, and that's no, it's so. And once they did the Treaty of Versailles, what they did, and again, I'm not defending Hitler. I'm just telling you that on the surface, what they did is they took away provinces that were German. They took land from them, and they find him. So when if Hitler had died in like 1938, he would have been considered probably Germany's greatest leader. This is great. And because Germany had a worse depression than we did in the Great Depression. Germany was devastated. And he took them from the ashes. He built the Autobahn, he built the infrastructure up, and he got everybody a Heil Hitler, and they're all on board the same thing. And he did look around and blame the Jews for the media. And again, that's why if you look around today, would the situation be ripe for that? I mean, but he was pointing out in Germany in the 1920s, Berlin had a media that to some extent is like ours in terms of movies, and they were pushing the envelope constantly, in terms of sexuality and kind of things that were offensive to Christians back then. So Hitler played on that. And as you know, with the Wall Street and the Rise of Hitler, he wasn't. I try to tell the lovers of Hitler, now this guy wasn't just some guy that got up on a table in a beer hall and just it took the country over by storm. It's like AOC. You don't become a waitress and then go to Congress. That doesn't.
She owned the
It's
bar,
impossible.
by the way.
So
everyone tries to act like she just worked there. She owned the bar.
Oh, I didn't know that. Okay, I didn't know that. Really? Okay, but even as a bar owner, I mean, somebody has to back somebody like that. You don't get to. Her own brother said she auditioned for it. That's what I've been trying to get that guy. You can't find him anywhere because I don't know. He probably wouldn't say it now, but that's what he said originally. Oh yeah, she auditioned for the role. They were casting a member of Congress, but once he did that, he was able to tell them, hey, look what they did to us. They find us. They devastated the economy, and of course the Germans responded to that because they knew that had happened. But by that Treaty of Versailles, they guaranteed that that Germany would probably eventually revolt against that and say, hey, this is unfair, and try to take that land back, and try to Hitler, of course, because he was controlled, he obviously went beyond that, and we know what happened in terms of the rest of the war. But people, and then my book Crimes and Cover-ups, I talk about the trials of Nuremberg. Even today, they talk about COVID and everything else. We need a Nuremberg trials. No, that's the last thing we need. Again, that took the concept of finding the losers even farther. That's okay. For the first time in history, we win a war, and we're going to put the losers on trial. We're going to legally prosecute them for losing a war. And that's what they did. And not all of them, just some of them.
Selective ones.
Like Toho of Japan, he didn't go on it. He lived on until late 1980s or something. Nobody talks about that. And of course, we know Werner von Braun, he went over and founded NASA under Operation Paperclip. So they were very selective. But the idea that you put people on trial, that's very, and at the time, there were lots of people that opposed that, including F. Kennedy, then Senator John F. Kennedy, young guy to speak out against it. In his book, Profiles in Courage, again, most people don't know this. One of his profiles in courage was Senator Robert Taft, who was a Republican. And his chapter was about how Taft had the courage to call out the Nuremberg Convention for the farce it was. So, I mean, people think JFK was so different than any other Democrat that you can't imagine it. But that's something probably, again, I didn't know until I researched it.
There's a lot. There's a lot to unpack. There's a lot. You've dropped a lot of bombs on us right here, and I find it very interesting. Again, a lot of people don't understand that World War I, we see the establishing of the Bank of International Settlements, which becomes the centralized bank of all the centralized banks. And this bank is extracting wealth out of Germany at an insane number, like just destroying it. And which sets the environment up for somebody like Hitler to come up and rise. Now, again, in the book, Wall Street and the Rise of Hitler, they break down not only all the corporations that were basically treating Hitler like a sugar baby, okay, but they also break down all the American corporations that were like set up basically boards of German companies. And one of the biggest one is IG
Farben.
Yeah. And how they had American board on this American board of IG Farben is heads of state Federal Reserves, like the New York State Federal Reserve. I mean, you can't be fighting the bankers while taking all their money at the same time.
No, and that's why, again, it's what happened was after this, and then as soon as World War II ends, you have the Nuremberg trials, and then instantly, again, and the vast majority of Americans don't know this, the Soviets, who had been our allies, Uncle Joe Stalin, one of the biggest murderers of all time, but hey, he's cool. Hitler's bad, but he's cool. He's some mass murders are more equal than others, to quote Orwell.
Yeah.
As soon as the war ends, suddenly, then the Soviets are the enemy. And Winston Churchill, again, drunken war criminal, is a guy that was drunk all the time and just, he wanted nothing but to bomb people nonstop. But he's a hero. Like Lincoln, he's a great hero. You bring the down. Suddenly you have the Cold War. And I talked a lot about the phony Cold War in my book. And that's why and I'm going to go further into Joe McCarthy. And I'm trying to restore his reputation because the guy was a hero. He was not any kind of, and just to tell you how misrepresented he is, the word McCarthyism is, and again, you ask the average American, they're so stupid. And they probably had some kind of dim recognition. Well, it must have been somebody named McCarthy. They don't know who it was, but they figure, well, I guess it was named after somebody named McCarthy. And but they don't know who it was. And the idea was he's like associated with the witch hunt that enveloped Hollywood, the blacklisting of the Hollywood 10 and all that, and people, weren't allowed to work anymore. And all that came from the House Un-American Activities Committee, which was run by a guy named J. Parnell Thomas, who no one's heard of. So if you want to demonize somebody, demonize him. McCarthy was in the Senate. He had nothing to do with anything with Hollywood, getting anybody fired, nothing, absolutely nothing to do. He was a genuine war hero. They called him Tail Gunner Joe. Friend of the Kennedy family. He was the godfather to RFK's oldest child, Kathleen Kennedy. And, again, people don't know this. And he was trying to root out what he thought were Soviets in the army, especially. That's all he was doing. And because of that, the wrath came. And he was also the first so-called conspiracy theorist in public to call out FDR about Pearl Harbor. I found that out while researching this book as well. So he comes off pretty good. And he goes into Bethesda Naval Hospital at age 48 with a knee problem, dead 2 days later.
What?
No autopsy ever done. Instantly smeared as an alcoholic. So again, this is supposedly one of the great demons of the 20th century. Excuse me, you don't do an autopsy on a guy that dies of a knee issue at age 48. So that's what we're looking at. And this, he was buddies with James Forrestal. I talked about him in the previous book. Forrestal was Truman's Secretary of Defense, who was pushed out of a window at Bethesda Naval Hospital a few years before that. He was the fiercest critic of Israel. After he kept saying, Truman, this is idiotic. What you created here? And he was pushed out of a window, man. And before he died, I use this line all the time. In interviews, he told McCarthy, he said, McCarthy, if there wasn't this giant grand conspiracy, once in a while they'd make a mistake in our favor. That's a great line. If this is all random. Yeah, they would there would be some good somewhere once in a while, somebody, but it never does because there's nothing random about it.
Yep. Yeah,
And
one
that's
hundred
and so,
percent, 100%.
but
Because it's like
McCarthy and Forstall.
basically, I used to tell Brian Callen that all the time. I'm like, Brian, if there wasn't a conspiracy, why do the people in power always get more power and more money at the end?
Yeah,
How come it never goes the opposite way? How come they
right.
never? They always get richer and they always get more power. They consolidate power after all these events every time. It never goes against their way. I mean, if you take a look at, like, there are people involved in 9/11 who should have been able to say, hey, this plane's been hijacked, go deal with it. They didn't, and they got promotions.
Yep. Yep. No one was ever, you're right. No one was ever punished over that whatsoever. That's what typically happens. So, and it doesn't matter. The JFK assassination, the Secret Service, nobody says anything. They're not criticized at all, not even remotely criticized. And that's why so many parallels between the Trump shooting, which, by the way, I started commenting like before it was a month old. I kept saying, what happened? Talk about going down the memory hole. What happened to the Trump shooting thing? You had tons of people believe that was fake, but whatever it was, everybody stopped talking about it, including Trump. It's like, wait a minute, this was a shooting of the presidential front runner, and the Secret Service obviously stood down, way more obviously than they did with JFK. They literally did nothing when a guy's walking around with a rifle, and all the people are trying to point out to law enforcement, hey, that guy, he's climbing up the wall of the building there with a rifle. It didn't attract their attention at all, and nobody cares. And that's the kind of thing I think when you look at that, that's why people don't. So many of us think everything is fake news because none of their stories make any sense. I mean, I've investigated so many things and researched so much history, and I'm in vain trying to find one significant story or one significant incident that they told the truth about, and I haven't found it yet. I mean, you scratch the surface on everything. Okay, another obvious lie. They literally lie about everything. So when people talk about flat Earth, hollow Earth, computer simulation, I'm open to all of it because, again, they lie about everything. So why, they're going to tell the truth about what exactly? So this, I think that's what people, you got to take it to the logical extreme that these people are liars. They have absolutely no compunction about anything. That's why they're saying, you think they would cause 3,000 people to die in 9/11, or they would do this? Of course. They sacrificed millions of people for absolutely no reason in World War One, and really no reason in World War II either. I mean, that was contrived as well. But I mean, how many millions of people died in the 20th century? And you want to know why the white race is going extinct? Like 90% of the people that died in the 20th century were whites, and these senseless wars that made no sense at all. And but people, they're ready to send their. You look at how many Americans are willing to pony up billions to Ukraine. It's like putting up the stupid Ukraine flag. It's like you try to ask them, well, okay, what is it? So I just wrote about on Substack about threat to democracy, because I'm obviously a huge threat to democracy at this point. We all are. But what does that even mean? So this guy, you're standing with democracy here. Zelensky's like Abraham Lincoln, where he shut down all the newspapers and quashed all the opposition political parties, and just because he can play the piano with his penis, we got to do this. I mean, but Americans are on board with that. Yeah, that's democracy. That's democracy. But free speech isn't democracy. That's where we're at.
It's so nuts to me. It is so nuts how everything's an inversion. And like I've told people, I'm like, a lot of shit that America is going through right now is probably karma for us going in there and committing a genocide on Iraq. I mean, how many people did we kill in the Middle East over a lie? I mean, the number's got to be 4 million people. So when you see people put up like 6 million Jews for Hitler, and then somebody put up 4 million people for Churchill, fine. If you want to go with those numbers, fine. George Bush is right there with 4 million people.
Right. Exactly. And it's again, it's like you keep can. First of all, again, whatever number they attribute to any foreign leader, I'm skeptical of, because they lie about everything. And this was one of your boogeymen. You know what H.L. Mencken called foreign hobgoblins, and that's what they are. That's what they are. So of course you're going to tell me something, and maybe they were horrible, but I don't trust you to tell me how many people they killed at all. First of all, you have no way. How would you even know that? You have no way. It's not like there was any documentation that they kept track of it and they published. Okay, we're up to 6 million now. You know, nobody's going to do that, but they can tell you how many they killed. Okay, well, no, I'm sorry, I don't trust you. You say Oswald did it, so as long as you're saying that, you have to tell the truth about something first before I'm willing to consider anything you're saying about all these other things. But that's and that's where we are. So that's why when you look at that's why these things are so important. There's so many threads going back to history. These things are all connected, and we are where we are because over and over again, the wrong side prevailed. And I mean, you can look at somebody like FDR as awful as he was. Again, he's considered the second greatest president. In reality, he's the second worst president from my perspective.
Hey, Don,
but
can you power rank your worst presidents? Power rank them. Let's go top 5.
Pretty much, you pretty much flip flop what the court historians say. Top 5 is definitely Lincoln. Number 1, there's with a bullet. FDR is number 2. Wilson is number 3. And then any modern American, right? Obviously
Obama,
Clinton, George W. Bush, Obama. They would probably round out the top 5. LBJ was pretty awful too, but they've gotten progressively worse. So they're constantly. I think if Kamala Harris gets in there, I'm pretty sure she'll. She has a good chance to make the list too. And Donald Trump is not on there because again, like I tell you, I'm a Trump agnostic, but it's because he doesn't do anything. You can't do anything wrong if you don't do anything. And he's not doing anything bad, so he's kind of a loud Calvin Coolidge. Calvin Coolidge is one of my favorite presidents because he didn't do anything. He couldn't do anything wrong. He just, he kept quiet, and it's a hell of a note when that's what you have to try to root for. But unfortunately, these presidents try to do something. JFK was again the only president that I know of that attempted to do some good things, and you saw what happened to him. But he was an anomaly. And if you look at all these guys, you scratch the surface a little bit. And but I would say those would be my worst presidents. But really, there's so few presidents that have been good. I mean, all of the early ones were okay, up until, and that's what the thing about Lincoln. The first 15 presidents, with the exception of James K. Polk, and this book we talk about the Mexican-American War, and I was shocked to discover something. I mean, there were some early indications there of the total war strategy that we saw in the Civil War. I mean, they did some horrible things in Mexico, same kind of stuff. Going after civilians, raping, stealing, very similar to what we saw. And, as much as I hate a group like La Raza that's around today, they've got a point. We did steal a lot of land. So, I mean, so it goes back to then. So we said Polk was the first president. I think he was maybe the 13th, 14th, something like that. But up until that point, none of the other presidents, whether you agree with them or not, they didn't overstep their constitutional bounds. They all knew what their powers were under the Constitution. Polk did by invading Mexico and causing a war and stealing land was ridiculous. But and then Congressman Abraham Lincoln, ironically, was one of the ones who spoke out against it. And then later, obviously, did something on a far grander scale that was much worse. But Lincoln comes along as the 16th president and just shatters. We've never looked back. Since Lincoln, I don't know. Like I said, Coolidge didn't do anything, so he wasn't bad. Harding actually wasn't that bad. He didn't do much either. I think he got caught, with scandals from a bunch of his friends. And McKinley got pushed into the Spanish-American War of 1898, which was our first foray really into. It was again a terrible line we crossed in the sand, and he really didn't want to go there. But Teddy Roosevelt, another highly ranked president who would be probably 6 or 7 on my list of worst presidents. And you want a genuine racist? There's your boy. Read some of his quotes. I had him in Crimes and Cover-Ups. And, he was the only good Indian is a dead Indian school. He didn't say that, Sheridan did, but they all, he has a lot of racist quotes on the record. They just don't quote him because
By the way,
they prefer
Sheridan,
to
there's
promote
another
it.
guy who was exalted as a Union hero, who was one of
Yes.
the biggest pieces of shit in the history, in the annals of history. I mean, just a total asshole, a murderer on the battlefield
Yep.
and off. I mean, just a really bad guy.
Yeah, and anybody who says the only good Indian is a dead
Yeah.
Indian, I mean that was his quote. You know, it's like, okay,
Proud. He
cool,
was proud of
you
it. He
left
was.
that.
I mean, and
Yeah.
the funny, one of the funny things about Sheridan is that the people that actually knew him best disliked him quite a lot. It seems like, but he kind of went down as, you know, a hero of history because of, you know, how belligerent he was.
I guess it's
really.
who are you a hero to?
Well,
Right?
yeah, I mean, yeah, it's because of what he did. I mean, his violence, and he was the victor so many times.
Everything
And this
Don is talking about right now,
that's
everything Don is saying right now just reminds me so much of what Israel's doing in Gaza. Like,
Sure.
this seems to be, and maybe it's done on purpose, but this seems to be the first time we're getting a look at a war not through the lens of a corporate media, but from real feet on the ground. And not only that, from the soldiers committing the war crimes, like openly bragging about what they're doing, because they don't think they're doing anything wrong, because they've been green light to do inhumane shit to other human beings. So, like, when Don talks about all these kind of war, what the U.S. did in Mexico, what the North did to the South, and all that stuff, this is done gleefully. I've said this forever. Like really, like the Israel-Palestine stuff is a business transaction cloaked in a religious war, in which they've armed one side and allowed them to commit unholy acts on the other side in order to take more land to create a canal. It's always been about that. In my humble opinion, you go, Sam, what do you really think Israel's about? Is it religious? Oh, sure. It's a very old religious site. Yeah, for sure. But the real reason is to control the trade route, one of the most important trade routes in the world, which is to get the goods from Asia and Africa to Europe. That's one of the most important trade routes out there. Now, if you can control the land, which is going right through Gaza, dude, the amount of money and power that allows you to have now, and it just cripples Egypt. It's going to cripple Egypt if no one's using the Suez Canal, because now Israel has a two-way canal that's just streamlined. It's crazy.
No, and I was going to include, I don't think it got included in the book, but I wanted to include as an appendix a letter that then 22-year-old John F. Kennedy wrote to his father again. And I'm trying to restore Joseph Kennedy Sr.'s reputation too. That guy was a genuine American hero. Don't believe the lies, the bootlegger, mafia is all bullshit. Absolutely. All comes from CIA and mafia sources. Joe Kennedy was a patriot. He was a World War I protester, a World War II protester, was one of the first critics of the Federal Reserve, and served in the 1950s on a commission that's never talked about to try to rein in the CIA. And he was the biggest critic of the CIA's in the 1950s. He was a real critic of Israel at the time. And John F. Kennedy, at 22 years old, in this letter, shows such sophistication, such brilliance. Again, I'm a Kennedy fanboy, but it's because of stuff like this. He writes to his letter, his dad, who he clearly loves, and he analyzes the situation, 8 years before Israel was created. He analyzes it beautifully and talks about the problems that are going to result if they try to do this, if they try to create a Zionist state. So he knew it. His father knew it. And, once it was created, people like James Forrestal knew it. And that's why they pushed him out of a window at Bethesda Naval Hospital. It was bound to. It's amazing that you haven't had more problems because of this. The only reason you haven't had more problems was because you inserted a group of people who were going to be at war with the neighboring people, all the Arabs around them. You just installed them with this and gave them you built them the third most powerful military in the world. They're the size of a postage stamp. But because of us, they're armed to the teeth. And you convince they're acting in their defense. They stole land. They've gone to the point of denying Palestine ever existed. I've had people argue with me. I'm showing the maps that from the 1920s and the 1910s that have Palestine. Oh, it's fake news. It's like, what? They actually deny these people existed. So you talked about unpersons out of Orwell. You steal their land, claim they don't exist, and the only reason Israel hasn't been obliterated is because of the weapons we gave them. So yeah, they're real big guys. Yeah, they're armed with these weapons. That, so you have the poor Palestinian kids throwing rocks at tanks. That's what you. But it's interesting in the last year or so, and it's I never thought there would be so much talk about this stuff, and it goes right from there into Jewish influence and how much power they have and everything. So you have something like Candace Owens. I mean, she was a kind of a milk toast. She's a black woman conservative for a long time. Suddenly, she is. I mean, she's on the verge of becoming the black female version of David Duke now. I mean, she is really out there, and she's talking about really extreme stuff all the time. And
Are
she's
you
talking
talking
about
Candace
what
Owens?
about all the
Yeah.
yes, Candace Owens. What about all the and she rightly mentions what about all the Catholics that were targeted by the Bolsheviks? All the priests and nuns they killed, all the churches they destroyed. That was ethnic. That was for a particular religion. Nobody talks about that. And
It's
and
crazy to
probably
me.
there were more millions that died that way.
It's crazy to me that she's seen as
Yeah,
this,
no,
like,
and
she's
it's
saying crazy stuff. In reality, most stuff she's saying is correct. The big thing, it's so crazy because now the big thing when she goes, I don't think they're Jews. I think it's something deeper, and
yeah,
and it go and reality, dude, she's totally right, dude. It's Babylonians. Now they're gonna cut this clip
yeah,
and they're gonna run it like, oh, Sam won't name the Jews. I talk about them all the time, dude. My girlfriend's
yeah.
Jewish. I'm really not interested in this broad strokes that go where
Yeah,
like
yeah,
hate
me neither. No,
everybody of this group. Like
right.
like my whole dream has always been like we can have open discussions about everyone, right? Like, regardless of
Right,
what your ethnic group background, your religious background, your sexuality, your gender, whatever it is,
right.
you do dumb shit, you can get called out. I'm not
Yeah, no,
into
you're
this, like, starting to hate everybody of a whole group because the actions of a few, because I saw that's
no,
what
you
happened to
can't.
white people in 2018 on Twitter around that. Just you could
That's
tee
right.
off on white people for everything. You could actually, it's very interesting because Don, you brought this up a long time ago, and I agree with it, but I didn't like back it up as much as I should when we were talking about the Catholic Church being pedophiles and like all this stuff's coming out now about like Talmud Jews and their view on pedophilia.
Sure. Right.
And you're totally right because now when I go back and I read this thing about I'm reading about Israel and Mossad's role in the assassination of JFK, you hear about
Yeah.
Meyer Lansky and
Yep.
how like Hollywood was instrumental in
Yep.
painting that organized crime was Italian and not Jewish.
Yes, exactly. You're right. And it's it's like you. I don't like to generalize. That's why I hate so much when they say white people. They say you say all white people, and it's white people usually saying it. I say, or so are you exempting yourself? You mean all white people but you, your kids? I mean, are you exempting them? But the Jewish question is weird because, like, I try to tell people, I don't know what it means to be a Jew. Most of my relatives, I'm not Jewish, but most of my relatives are Jews because, or part Jewish because my mother's sister married a Jewish guy a long time ago, and he converted to Catholicism, and they had 11 kids, and a bunch of them
Damn.
had 7 kids. So there's tons of these cousins I have that are partially Jewish. None of them are go to synagogue or anything, but so I don't know what that means. So what are they? I have other partially Jewish relatives. It doesn't. But on the other hand, so I don't want to, and I have people that have been Jewish supporters of mine. I won't condemn an entire group, but you have to acknowledge that Jews are 2% of the population. And they're the president of every television network and the president of every motion picture studio. That's that's impossible to happen without some kind of orchestration. And that's the gist of the problem. That's why you have so many people because they won't acknowledge. Okay, explain it. If you can prove somehow you're superior by virtue of being a Jew, okay, but it doesn't make any sense. There's no way to explain that logically. And so you have people that do turn, genuine haters and everything and end up idolizing Hitler because of this, because they won't answer the question. And then you have something like our Congress. Okay, if you're upset that people are saying the Jews run things, and what's the thing you shouldn't do? But the last thing you should do is pass a law called the Anti-Semitism Awareness Act, where you make it illegal to
Mm.
criticize Israel and the Jews. I mean, isn't that kind of acknowledging that, okay, we do run things and you can't criticize? And then Thomas Massey, the best congressman by far out there, he goes on and gives the most remarkable interview I've ever seen a politician give to Tucker Carlson a couple months ago. If you watch that interview, if you can, I've never heard anybody talk about AIPAC and Israel like he does. He said, everybody, all the Republicans but me, have an AIPAC babysitter, and I kicked him out of my office. A week later, his wife suddenly dies.
Yeah.
Still don't know why. 51 years old. We still don't know what happened to her. And he's not backing off. But I mean, look, man, is that a coincidence? Well, I don't know. It's possible. But they haven't given an explanation why. But on top of the the Anti-Semitism Awareness Act, I don't even know, was it virtue signaling, or are they really going to prosecute some people that, I mean, if you say the Jews have too much power, or if you question why Israel was born, how it was created, and that's the problem.
Dude,
how was it created? Yeah, and so, but there was very little discussion of that Anti-Semitism Awareness Act, passed overwhelmingly, but it sure looked like, if you're an outside observer and you're saying, okay, this is the group that, they have a chip on their shoulder because everybody keeps saying, hey, you guys run things, you're in charge. Okay, we're going to pass a law that says you can't say that.
Yeah.
What's the old expression? If you want to know who's in charge, find out who it is you can't criticize. Well, apparently now it's illegal to do that, and that's frightening, because but again, people, so many people don't, and they're afraid. I don't care, and I want somebody to, first of all, like in my Substack, this last Substack, I said, please, some Democrat, give me your definition of democracy. I gave the definition from the dictionary, how the majority rules, the people rule. Obviously, we don't. That's not happening in America. The majority of the people, 80% of the people, are living paycheck to paycheck, or they're homeless on the street. So, I've written about that in my book, Survival of the Richest. The bottom half of America has nothing, less than 1% of the collective wealth, the bottom 50%. So we don't meet that criteria. So what is it then? Give us your definition, because you're coming out against freedom of speech and all that stuff. So what is your definition? By the same token, Candace Owens, all she wanted Ben Shapiro to do, she wanted to debate him, but she wanted him to define, what is anti-Semitism? So tell me what it is. What's your definition for anti-Semitism? They can't do it. Instead, if you're making any kind of inference they don't like, oh, that's anti-Semitic. Just like same thing with racism. Okay, if you're going to say sleep is racist and birds are racist and Band-Aids, and they've said all that, if you're going to even mean anymore, but so come up with a definition. They can't come up with a definition. They just use it as a pejorative term. If they don't like what you're saying and they want to shut you down, that's racist. That's anti-Semitic.
Listen,
no, it's stupid.
You can't be in positions of power and make decisions, and then those decisions are met with criticism, and then to answer that criticism is to say your family was in the Holocaust. You can't do that.
Yes,
that's not how it works. That's not. You can't go. Hey, this is why you can't criticize me, and on top of that, you're not allowed to discuss this giant event. You can't do both of those. You can't use that as a great shield against criticism, and on top of that, say you can't analyze it and discuss it. It doesn't work like that. And listen, dude, I hate Jews this. I hate Jews this. I hate blacks this. I hate women this. I hate gays this.
Yep.
I hate white people this, Latinos. And we just keep going. I hate these broad strokes. But if you come at me with statistics and you go, this percentage of this is causing doing this, this, I think you should be able to discuss it. I really do.
Exactly. You have to. And again, by not discussing it, you create real hatred. You create real Jew haters out there. You create real bigoted people that hate blacks. I mean, if you just won't simply know, okay, it has to. Sure, there are economic reasons for it. We know that poverty creates that, and the media creates this ghetto culture and extols it. Spike Lee and people like that make movies glamorizing it, but blacks commit like 60% of violent crime or something, and they're 12% of the population.
Statistics.
That's a huge disparity. There has to be. You can't not acknowledge that. You can't decide, well, the way I'm going to handle that is every Spider-Man and Batman movie, I'm going to have these white skinhead guys that look like they came out of the 1920s running the mean streets of New York. That's their explanation for it, to try to create a narrative that doesn't exist. And you have to face reality. Explain that. That doesn't mean every black's bad or anything like that, but it means their culture isn't, whatever that ghetto culture is, isn't something white people should be mimicking, and they are. They're mimicking it. They're copying that. Okay, you know what? This English thing is racist. What the hell? I'm gonna speak in the stupid pidgin English, and we'll call it ebonics. I'm gonna dislearn something, and that's what we have. They're actually dumbing themselves down. And I'm getting away from my book now, but I criticize the culture a lot as well, because it's,
No, you're
again,
totally right, man. It's like, it's just crazy times. And I mean, I whatever you think of Elon Musk, and I don't trust any billionaire as far as I can kick him. But something is happening, whether it is being allowed or it's actually being astroturfed, I don't know. But there seems to be a real discussion going on, and people are waking up to it. Now, a big thing I wanted to talk to you about is this assassination that happens with or Trump. I've never seen in my life so much misinformation instantly out. There were people who normally get it right, getting it wrong. There's still people who I think do amazing work in the space, still covering it like it's 100% a real assassination. Now pictures of Trump's ears coming out, looks perfectly fine. Doesn't even look like it had good work on it. Like, it doesn't even look like a better ear than, or like, if you had your ear blown off and you went and got the best doctors, they would give you some fucking $5 million man fucking ear, the $1 million man ear.
I would have told him to take a piece off. I would be walking around right now with like half my ear on. Like, it really went down.
Trying to pull pussy. Like, I got shot, survived. What's up, bitches?
No, you're right. You're right. They're and you're right. They're because and it's ironic that I had a friend of mine who has never agreed with anything I've ever said. He thinks I'm a complete lunatic, like a lot of people that know me do in real life. They're like, crazy Don. He's crazier by the minute. Now they're actually publishing his work. What the hell? These guys, they're incensed by it, I'm sure, because they've heard me ranting and raving forever. But this guy texts me out of nowhere, says, "Well, I hope you're going to say something about the fake Trump shooting." Now, of course, he has TDS. He's never thought anything was fake in his life. But now you have Joy Reid, Keith Olbermann, Rosie O'Donnell. They're all coming out and saying it's fake. Now, these are the people that want to send people like me to prison. They want to send Alex Jones to prison for questioning Sandy Hook or the Boston bombing or anything else. Oh, my God, that's crazy. What about the children? But in this case, they hate Trump so much. But they're making a point. Because as you note, I mean, Trump said his hand was covered with blood and all that. Come on. I mean, he's a 78-year-old man jumps up like that right away. But so I look at whatever it is. So I'm not going to anger either side, because I don't know. But all I know is that they should look into the event, and you start with, what were the Secret Service doing? Now you say, okay, Trump, because if Trump was, this was a shenanigan pulled by him, it doesn't appear to have worked, because he's the only person I know that could get an assassination attempt and fall in the polls, supposedly. How does that work? Sympathy vote at all? I mean, geez. Yeah. But and a part of it is because of him, because people are. But again, the haters, they're analyzing this like they wouldn't analyze anything else. You think if this was Joe Biden getting his ear clipped or something, you'd have the exact same opposite. You had the right wing saying it was fake, and you'd have the left wing saying, "It's terrible. You should be put in prison for questioning it." But it should be questioned. But you just simply, again, if you honestly investigate it, same thing with Sandy Hook or anything else. Just investigate it. Look at the Sandy Hook footage and say, okay, well, the helicopters, I'm looking at the helicopter footage, and I don't see anything going on, really. I mean, I don't see any evacuation. I mean, ask that kind of stuff. Why weren't the EMT people allowed in the schools? Same thing. Look at the Boston bombing footage, and okay, what is this guy doing? What is this guy doing here? Why was it announced? Why did they make an announcement saying this was a drill going on? They told the crowd that before it. So you just ask those questions. You don't have to say nobody died or anything like that. Same thing with Trump. You have an easy investigative foundation here. You just look at don't fire the director Cheadle, which is what they did. She had, I mean, okay, that's nice, but I doubt very seriously
she's a sacrifice.
Yeah, I don't think she's an awful person. She goes back to Dick Cheney and everything, but she's the one that wanted to destroy the evidence when the cocaine was found in the White House. So she's certainly a typical, horrible bureaucrat, but I doubt very seriously that she officially trained the Secret Service agents to not react at all to a guy walking around with a rifle when every witness is pointing it out. So that's what you would do. You would get every agent that was there, all the agents in the Iwo Jima photo, including the DEI hire that's ducking down herself, instead of fighting Trump down. But you would ask them, okay, what's going on here? Is this your training? And you just, because there's no explanation. They can't possibly explain it. You see the guy scaling the side of a building, you're alerted to it, and you don't confront him. You don't take Trump off the stage, and then when they can say, okay, after Trump is shot at or whatever, he jumps up. And again, you can say that's his personality, and people want to believe Trump's just so bold. I have to say, fight, fight, fight. Okay, even if that's true, the Secret Service's job is to hold him down. Say, no, Mr. President, you can't do that. That's dangerous. You could present, but no, they let him jump up. Nobody's covering. He's like Lee Harvey Oswald. Nobody's covering his front, so there's another shot could easily come in. They don't do that. Their training is to cover him and get him out of there. They didn't do that. So you asked and it's not like any of them did their job. So you ask, okay, what were you thinking here? Okay, well, first of all, why aren't you play the witnesses? That we're talking about. Hey, we tried to tell law enforcement. Say, why weren't you? How did you not see this guy? Isn't that what you're looking for? So that's what a real investigation would be. But I don't think you're going to see that because nobody wants to get to the truth of it, whether it was fake or real or not. And Trump's not talking about it either. He should be making political hay out of it. That Iwo Jima photo should be his campaign photo. I don't see it happening that way. So I don't understand it, because I thought when it happened that regardless of whether it was real or staged, that this probably meant, okay, Trump's going to get back in the White House. And then suddenly, then Biden decides to withdraw, and it was decided for him. It was a silent coup, and they suddenly promote Kamala Harris, and suddenly she's surging in the polls. Like, what? None of that makes any sense. So I don't even know how you analyze this stuff. But yeah, you're right. I mean, people should ask. They need to ask questions about the Trump shooting, but the roles have been reversed, because you can't really, the Trump supporters, you can't question it too much or they get mad at you. I mean, they're not as bad as the left. They don't want to prosecute you, I don't think, yet for doing it, but the left wants to prosecute you if you question it. Oh, okay, this sounds like a thought crime. I don't know what this is, but they're trusting in it because they think it was an act of God and Trump's a miracle and all that, and he's so courageous. But the left thinks it's a joke, and they're openly talking about it. Again, you couldn't go on any television show and question any of these other events and get away with it. They're doing it. Joy Reid, Keith Olbermann, now Rosie O'Donnell, they're all doing it. And because it's Trump, it doesn't matter. So I don't know, man. I don't predict politics anymore because I have no idea what they're going to do. I facetiously predicted, just jokingly predicted a couple, maybe a year ago that, it could be the script could call for Trump to be elected from prison. And maybe he'll serve out his entire term on Rikers Island. And they'll go like live from Rikers Island tonight.
Bro, that would be the best chaos ever.
Yeah. But I mean, it's looking like that's a possibility. Yeah. It's looking like that's a possibility. I mean, you can envision Trump, like you could have like some of his inmates could be some of his cabinet. And he could be bragging about, they thought I was going to be a bitch, but I made them my bitch. You could see there's so many possibilities for it, But I don't know if they're going to go that way or not, but it wouldn't shock me.
Does the Secret Service follow him? Does the Secret Service follow him in jail, right? That's part of the...
I don't, who knows? I mean, and it's got a built-in excuse for why he can't do anything this time either. Because they can just say, well, the Democrats can pass a law saying, well, president serving in prison, he can't do this, he can't issue executive orders, can't do that, that kind of stuff. I mean, they could come up with a million, and that would be his excuse. Well, what do you want? He's in prison. What was he supposed to do? It's like last time he was under attack the entire time. What was he supposed to do?
Yeah.
And that's what their excuses are. They try to explain why he didn't do anything. Well, I don't know. He could have issued some executive orders that he promised, but he didn't. But I don't know, man. It's disillusioning. That's why both sides are so bad. But I usually end up, most people think I'm more of a Trump defender, because the other side is just Trump's an actor. I call him the Trumpenstein Project. I call the whole thing the Trumpenstein Project. But the other side is just batshit crazy. They're absolute lunatics.
Yeah, I mean, they're just crazy. And when you go,
I can't.
Don, when you go back to the Trump assassination, dude, you see videos of the of law enforcement. They're just walking in circles. They're just doing this like weird pointing thing. They're just like, hey,
Sandy Hook.
Hey. Yeah, it's like Grand Theft Auto NPCs, you know, just like, hey, come over here, get it. What are you doing? I mean, just, it's so bizarre. Everything.
Nothing's getting done. They're just walking in circles. I'm like, what are you doing there?
And that's what people back in the day, that's what they analyzed about at the Sandy Hook fire station. They were saying the same stuff. That what are these people? They started analyzing, what are the people doing? It's the same people walking around in a circle, say, okay, what is the cowboy hero do? What are these people doing? If you actually watch it, and they don't count on most people, going into that much detail.
Yeah.
But if you look at it, it's like, wait a minute, that doesn't make any sense. Why is he doing that? So that's why I say, if you scratch the surface of any of these events, man, and I mean, the shooting they had today, I guess, in Georgia. I mean, I haven't looked at it yet at all, but I know if I spend any time on it, I'm quite sure if I looked at some witnesses talking and stuff, I would instantly become skeptical, just because it's just none of these things ever seem legitimate to me. And that's because we've been lied to about everything. So we're all jaded, and we just automatically say, as I say, anything that happens, I just assume it's fake until proven otherwise. They have to prove it's real to me, and so far they haven't been able to do it.
Hey, Don, right now, I don't know if you've seen this, but this is on MSNBC News. And by the way, MSNBC News sucks when my girlfriend says she's starting to get over it. By the way, she should have been over it 5 years ago, but we gotta love them and help them cross over to the other side of not watching any of this. So we're not going to discuss that. The real discussion is, she said, I'm over MSNBC, and that you should be, because right now, breaking news from 8 hours ago, Biden administration to hit Russia with sanctions for trying to manipulate U.S. opinion ahead of election. I mean, they think we're stupid.
Yeah, it is. And I don't, I don't.
Oh, I just saw it. Yep. I just saw the article. That's crazy.
Yeah, I saw that too. And it's the problem is that Trump, I call it the Trumpenstein Project. And I think he was injected in there to divide the country. And I think he was to kill all independent political movement. And he has destroyed all third parties. There's no hope of a third party, because nobody either wants to have a chance of him being elected or have him not be elected, depending whether you love or hate him. But the problem is when you have something like this, where he's so divisive, and he's got probably 70 to 80 million people, I think, maybe support him still. I would guess they will vote for him again, probably something like that. All those people, they're the ones that we're talking to. They're the ones that are awake to varying degrees. They all support Trump, or they did support him. And you can't those people are forever awake, even though they may grow disillusioned with Trump and finally realize, okay, he's not legitimate, but they know the corruption's there. They can see how crazy the other side is. They're never going to believe that men can have babies. They're never going to believe the transgender nonsense. They're just not going to believe it. So how do you put that genie back in the bottle? You can't do it. You can't put 70 to 80 million people. You're never going to get them to forget this stuff. And this is where we are now. What happens? And I've been asking that question for a long time. What happens after Trump? What happens? There's nobody on the horizon that has the personality that people will rally. And the other side is so committed to hating Trump. I guess they'll just transfer that derangement syndrome to whatever person comes up next and says anything like him and says bad things about them. But there's a tipping point there, and the 70, 80 million people have to have reached the tipping point. I mean, they can't possibly trust that there's going to be an honest election after the last two elections. They know there's not going to be, but they still kind of naively think he's going to win big and stuff. And if he does, it's because they want him to win. But I don't know I have no idea what they're planning to do, but I do know the only reason they would put Trump back in is because the other side is absolutely crazy and they want it to go down. They want it to burn. They want the cities to burn. Because if Trump got back, unless, like I said, maybe if my prediction is he's in prison, I'm not sure how they would react. Maybe they'd think it was funny or something. I don't know. But if he goes legitimately back in the White House, the city's going to burn. It's going to make the summer of 2020 look like a cakewalk. And that apparently is what they want. I don't understand why they want it to collapse, but
And you think that
you
would
think
be
the consolidated power they have.
that would be more chaotic than Harris winning, you think?
Well, yeah, because
I can see the
don't
same
think,
thing happening
again,
if Harris won.
well, but I don't think there's any indication that the other side would ever do that. I mean, the only the massive protests I've seen that I know of since the Civil War draft riots, maybe in the 1860s, and you wouldn't even consider that right wing or anything, but all riots or all protests really, going back to the Vietnam War and all the counterculture, the anti-war protests, even through the Gulf War originally until Obama became president. But all of those were from the left.
You just don't think there's I could just see people viewing that as because to me, it would have to be fixed for her to win. But obviously fixed, in a way that we haven't seen even with Biden.
Well, you would
I
think
that would be the line. That would be just the last straw for so many people. I feel anyway. I don't know.
Well, you would think, but the problem is that most of those people remember January 6th. They saw what happened. And again, January 6th was the largest protest we've seen from the right wing ever, I think. I don't know if there were many people that were close to it, but we saw what happened with the reaction was. I mean, it was draconian response like none ever seen before. I mean, the damage done that day was nothing compared to every, riot of the 1960s or anything like that, let alone the Antifa and BLM riots. But the response was so over the top that you would have to have, tens of millions. Now, if they did that, then you have a whole other thing altogether. But I just don't see. I think they're gun shy and I don't blame them. I don't want to go Enrico Tarrio, the Hispanic leader of the white supremacist Proud Boys. It's a strange way to run a white supracist organization, right? To pick a Hispanic to lead you. But he got 22 years and he wasn't even in Washington, D.C. People don't,
they just
I
don't
think
care.
people know that stuff.
No, they don't.
Yeah.
They don't know that.
If maybe, maybe you're right. Maybe the other side will go up, but I just think that it's treated because the left has a foundation that controls that, whether it's George Soros or any of these other people. So when you had the BLM and Antifa riots going, you had bricks being delivered in wheelbarrows to spots. I mean, somebody put them there, and you had BLM, and this is Black Lives Matter. They had big vans like like United Van Lines or something with BLM the logo on the side. Who paid for that? It was organized. It was there. Everything was there. The structure was there. The right doesn't have anything like that. You think they're going to see some Proud Boy vans or anything like that? So I don't know who would. There's nothing like the Antifa or Black Lives Matter on the right. Proud Boys was like a shell of that, and most of them are in prison now, I guess. So I don't know who would the KKK. I mean, there's nobody on the right I can't see anybody organizing something like that too. It would have to be a real organic grassroots effort, and I just we used to, a bunch of us used to try going back to the 90s even where once the internet was formed. One of the easiest ways you could have to make a statement to the powers that be, people used to try to send out mass emails to people saying, "Hey, don't buy gas next Thursday."
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Risk free. I mean, they can't come after you and arrest you for not buying gas on a particular day. Couldn't get people to do that. It would have made a statement. It would have made a statement that, hey, we can do this. And then you could have gone from there and say, hey, look, nobody go to a restaurant today. Nobody go to a grocery store today. Just make, and then eventually you go from that to let's have what we've talked about, a worker strike. We're not going to work today. That's how you get their attention, but you can't get people to come together. And that's why when you see something like the left coming together, it's because they've got organizers there. They've got a bunch of government undercover agents. And so when they have their riots, they have somebody there to direct them. we know that, for instance, in the summer of 2020, they had the guy on film. The first guy to throw a brick through a window was a cop, an off-duty cop. He went after him and said, "Hey, you know what? Why are you an off? How come you threw a brick through a window? You tried to? I mean, nobody did that because they don't want to know. Much as they, you see today, the Democrats go crazy. Merrick Garland, people like that go nuts if there's any indication about the FBI or anybody, being involved. And what is it? I think they had, I don't know how many people they claim that had the FBI. They know they had FBI people inside the Capitol dressed up as Trump people, pretending to be Trump. They know that, but they go nuts if you even admit it. So this is, I don't know. You'd have to circumvent all that to have a, but maybe, at some point you think people are going to reach a tipping point, and it's something like a Kamala Harris presidency might do that, because it is an insult to anyone's intelligence, when you listen to her talk and everything, and
Demoralizing.
But you can't underestimate the hatred people have for Trump.
It's crazy.
I've said before, it's like people would. No, it isn't. If people underestimate what Trump derangement syndrome is, so many of my friends from the JFK research community and stuff, people that loved my early books and interviewed me, wrote reviews. I mean, they canceled me, man, because I supported Trump in 2016 and said some good things about it. I've defended him off and on just because I think that I don't think, because these people, because they hate Trump so much, they like George W. Bush now. They think he's a great guy. They used to hate him. I say, wait, why just, so I say, if Hitler was around today, as much as they hate Hitler, if Hitler ran against Trump, I think those people would vote. They vote for Hitler. They would, because they hate Trump more than any human being has ever been hated. I've never seen anything like it. And so I'm a Trump agnostic. We're the smallest minority group in the world, and there's not very many of us around. But I don't. As long as he's in the middle, and he's in the middle of our politics, you can't predict anything that's going to happen, because it all revolves around him and somebody, a terrible candidate like Kamala Harris, who can't put. But Joe Biden didn't know where he was, so is she any worse than him? I don't know. So people are going to vote for anybody that runs against Trump. It's going to come down to, are there more people with Trump derangement syndrome than support it?
There's a lot of closeted Trump. There's a lot of closeted Trumpers coming out, though. A lot of people that last election didn't come out. A lot of older people they're just fed up. They're like, okay, and I was like, were you closeted before? He's like, yeah, but now I just gotta let people know. Well,
I don't. I would think he could still win, because he's got a lot more support for black males, especially. There's a lot, and Hispanics too, but they're males. But again, it's mostly males, because Trump has, people don't understand. Again, I'm not a misogynist, but it's been shown that if you just took the male vote, every state would be red. I mean, what does that say about what the gender gap is in voting? And so every state, even California. I mean, you look at that, it's like, how is that even possible? But it's people, and they don't talk about it enough, because if you do, then it's considered somehow hatred against women. It's just reality. And I've never understood, like I said, I don't understand how, if you're married to someone, what is the point of voting if you're going to vote for different candidates? You're canceling each other's votes out. Why bother? Why are you going to wait in line for that? It's just stupid. But apparently there's a lot of married couples that do that. I don't know. I don't know if I could be married to someone that would not, especially when you have the division now, because the woke Democrats are so insane. And that I don't know if I could be married to somebody that had that kind of different view on things, that, wasn't sure, they thought there were 57 genders there, but that's the gap we have now. So I don't know, man. I wouldn't make a prediction. Like I said, for all I know, they'll bring Hillary Clinton in at the last moment and install her as the president.
Damn.
Well, Don, as always, this was a great conversation. We love talking to you. Guess what? I just bought your book, so at least you got one sale out of this. I'm looking forward to it. One more time, Don, tell them where they can find you and find your books.
Well, at Don Jeffries on X, and DonaldJeffries at Substack.com. I Protest is what it's called on Substack. It's the only place I'm not being shadow banned. American Memory will have the Court Historians Promote Disinformation, with a foreword by the great Sam Tripoli. He wrote the forward, and that can be found anywhere. I mean, they're not banning that like they did Mask of the Truth. So you can get it Amazon, Barnes and Noble. And I mean, I tell people I don't care where you buy it. Get the best deal, because they give the authors so little in terms of royalties that it doesn't matter. We have to sell an awful lot of copies, so if we can do that, that's fine. But wherever, just get the best deal, and I'll suggest it to your libraries. That's fine too.